Let's see. Hi everyone. I think the first people are joining.
Great. Good morning, good afternoon, and maybe good evening, everyone. Thank you for dialing in. Let's allow 2 to 3 minutes for more people to join. And meanwhile, as we cannot see you, we'd be very keen to find out where you're dialing in from. So if you can find yourself or find the chat box and let us know where you're dialing in from, or which city or which country, that would be great. And we will start this webinar in 2 minutes from now. Thank you.
On your right, you can also see 2 polls that we have created. One poll is about the challenges that you are currently struggling with when it comes to ISGOTT or digitizing shipshore documentation. And the other one is more related to your interest of this webinar. So are you mostly interested in the ISGOTT use case, digital transformation, ISGOTT digital roadmap? We would be keen to know. I see already some answers coming in. You're muted, Edwin.
I was just saying I see a fantastic global spread from the East Mediterranean all the way to the Far East, from Africa until South Asia. So great, thanks for joining us, and we will get going in 1 minute from now.
So Edwin, where are you dialing in from?
From Singapore, I was going to say that.
Okay.
So I'm joined at least by one more person from Singapore. Hello, George. Nice to meet you again. Excellent. Well, we'll get going, and hopefully we'll see more people joining us along the way. But I would like to respect your time as well. So once again, a warm welcome to all of you, and thank you very much for making time to joining this very webinar. This event is co-hosted by Smartflow and NxtPort International. My name is Edwin Ebrahimi, and I have with me here Jelle Zwanenburg from Smartflow. Today we will talk about digitization of shipshore documentation, and we will talk about the challenges that terminals and vessels will typically face when they take their first steps in moving paperless. But of course, we will also share the many benefits that frontrunners in this space have enjoyed when they started digitizing their operational processes. Now, before we get going with the good stuff, we will first introduce ourselves and our companies a bit more. We will then give some context behind the new ISGOTT V6 shipshore safety checklist. And then Jelle will also provide a demo of the Smartflow application that is catering for this new workflow. And subsequently, there should be ample time for Q&A. And again, please use the chat box to add all your comments and questions. We may be able to add them or answer them on the fly, but we'll make sure we'll review them at the end during the Q&A as well. So yeah, let's move to the next slide, and I'll hand over to Jelle for his introduction.
Yeah, thank you, Edwin. I'm also very happy to be here among you and all the other professionals that have joined today. My name is Jelle Zwanenburg. I'm representing Smartflow. As Edwin already said, and we will share a bit more about that later, we have a partnership with NxtPort. Smartflow is founded in 2011 in the Netherlands, and what we have built is a connected worker platform. And with that platform, we aim to digitize front-end operations. And as example, you can think of the Digitizing the Shipshore conference. And we have a strong focus on the tank storage, maritime business, and the test, inspection, and certification industry.
Thank you, Jelle. Let me start by NxtPort before talking about myself. NxtPort was founded in 2016 in the port of Antwerp. It is a neutral data sharing platform, API enabled, that is securely connecting port stakeholders and maritime stakeholders alike in the port of Antwerp. We're currently operating out of 4 locations globally. I'm leading NxtPort Asia Pacific out of Singapore, and before joining NxtPort last year, I have been spending some 14 years in the tank terminaling business with Vopak in various commercial, logistics and operational roles. So I'm very familiar with this particular process. And in those years, I've developed quite a passion to remove pen, paper, rubber stamps, and Excel sheets from our industry, which is typically lagging behind a bit. So I'm very happy that I have the chance to join NxtPort and attack this generic problem of connectivity within ports and the maritime business. Now, a little bit more on NxtPort and how we are working together with Smartflow. Our tagline is indeed unleash the power of together, and we do so by offering a secure data sharing backbone. That's in essence the dark blue line you see in the middle. Initially developed to connect the stakeholders in the port, which you see on the bottom of your screen, be it the carriers, the terminal operators, but also the service providers. Think of the agents, the surveyors, but also financial institutions with each other or with players in the public sector like port authorities, customs, but also the fire and police departments. And when they were connected, the initial aim was to improve visibility in the supply chain and thereby efficiency. Now, when that was done, and that's all started in the port of Antwerp back in 2016, that's where soon, as we say, the magic started happening, because coalitions of the willing started forming. So front runners in the industry that started working together with application builders such as Smartflow to solve particular problems in their industry, whether you run containers in liquid bulk, dry bulk, or break bulk. We saw people started working together because the data was available to create solutions that really created efficiency, predictability in their supply chains. So one of the examples, as I said, is Smartflow, who created with one of the tank terminal companies that I just mentioned, an application to digitize the ISGOTT shipshore safety checklist, and that application is now available as a white label solution in one of our marketplaces for anyone to use. And what we typically see is that those marketplaces are now interesting for application builders to enter, because it gives them a channel towards all those players in the ports where they normally don't have so much access to. So the Smartflow application, the ISGOTT application that Jelle is going to demonstrate, is available on the marketplace on NxtPort, where you can use this application on a pay-per-use basis. Now, if you want to know more about Smartflow, about NxtPort, please find me on LinkedIn and get in touch. This is very much about Smartflow's ISGOTT application, so I'm quickly handing over to Jelle to start the demo and the presentation.
Yes, thank you, Edwin. All right, so first, a little bit of a deep dive into ISGOTT and into the process. ISGOTT is all about agreements between the terminal and the ship, as you may be aware of, and agreeing on the joint responsibilities that both parties have before a cargo operation can start. And that are agreements on the transfer procedures, but also agreements on the actions in the event of an emergency, and on completing the shipshore safety checklist. What has been changed with ISGOTT V6 in comparison with previous ISGOTTs is that there's now pre-arrival information that needs to be exchanged. And furthermore, the checklist exists of checks after mooring, pre-transfer, during transfer. They are called repetitive checks. And there are subsections developed for specific tankers like oil tankers, gas tankers, or chemical tankers. There's a lot of regulation going on around ISGOTT, meaning that either party should have an original copy at all times, that either party should agree with the assigned responsibility, But if they think they have a justified reason, that they don't have to agree with the assigned responsibility, they have to add a remark. To go a bit more in the process of ISGOTT, and it will also show you maybe a bit of the complexity that ISGOTT V6 will bring along, is what happens now is that the planner or the customer service prepares a vessel to arrive. So they do the port call, and they have to exchange information towards that vessel. For example, a terminal booklet, but they also have to submit part 2 of the ISGOTT checklist. All that information goes to the ship's captain, and prior to arrival, the ship captain also has to submit information back towards the terminal. And that process is outlined here below. So there's a lot of communication going on before the vessel actually arrives. And this is an example of such a checklist. So, and the pre-arrival information should be exchanged. That's a mandatory check. But also that the terminal booklet of the terminal should be reviewed by the vessel. Pre-berthing information is exchanged. So these are only the checks, but as you can imagine, there's a lot of information to send along when these checks need to be checked. Once arrived at the terminal, we know that the ship shore safety checklist pre-transfer has to be submitted, and currently that happens when people can come together. But we also have seen many situations, which we will talk little bit more about later, where people were not allowed to come near to each other, for example, due to COVID-related reasons, which made it more difficult to submit this part because they also had to scan and exchange the information via email. And this is a part that's a subsection that it's pretty relevant, for example, for a gas tanker, where the checks by both the tanker and the terminal have to be agreed upon pre-transfer. And then the last part of the ISGOTT is that there's a repetitive checks. So during transfer, it is mandatory to follow checks for either the terminal and for both the terminal and the tanker until the loading of or unloading of the vessel has been completed. And an example of that checklist, how it is provided by the OCIMF, can be found here. So here you can see that there has to be an interval time, for example, every 4 or 8 hours that the repetitive check has to be done, which times it was done, and if everything was being checked. Well, so far about the implication of ISGOTT V6. Maybe Edwin, from also your experience, can you share a little bit about the challenges that you may faced during digitizing this process?
Yes, thank you, Jelle. Indeed, and you touched about on a few of those things already. When ISGOTT V6 was announced, there were a few immediate challenges that the terminal operators were facing, namely that now, besides the existing pre-berthing questionnaires that terminals would send out through the agents to the vessels, or the terminal information booklets, now also pre-arrival questionnaires via the ISGOTT process came in, so that there were a lot of overlaps in a lot of those forms as well. So there was a clear need to optimize that. This all happens nicely during the COVID pandemic. So what we've seen, for example, here in Singapore, soon there were restrictions for loading masters to meet the chief officer on board because they were not allowed to enter the vessel. So everything was happening remotely, and in the beginning this was quite literally making scans of filled documents and send PDF files to each other. Yeah, that is of course not a very efficient way of working. So it was necessary to create a solution whereby this checklist could be filled out remotely if the local authorities were requesting the operators to work in that way. And we'll see later that actually Smartflow very quickly was able to adapt to that situation and offer both a face-to-face solution as well as a remote solution for terminals to use. Obviously, what we've seen also when we move to a digital version is that we are now only filling out one form Previously, we would have a lot of terminals where you would fill out 2 forms. The terminal would bring their ISGOTT checklist, the vessel would bring their own, and everybody was happily wasting another half an hour filling out each other's checklist. I think that is something that we wanted to avoid here. Obviously, compliance issues around making sure you have the right documentation filed for auditing or in case of issues. I think when you're storing paper, you can imagine that it's less efficient than having this digitally. So that's were the key things I would say we saw as challenges. So compliance, security, but also operational efficiency, and we actively looked at Smartflow to come up with a solution to attack those challenges, and that's what's happened, as you're going to see in the next slide. Now your turn to unmute, Jelle.
We also had a poll about this slide, and I see some answers coming in, but not everyone answered yet. So if you are happy to share your answer, what was the biggest challenge for you, or what other challenges may have faced, then we are happy to react to that. So please let us know in chat if these are all the challenges that you're also aware of, or that you have noticed other challenges as well of ISGOTT V6. I see in the poll that it's mainly inefficiency pre-arrival, Edwin, and the other one are quite evenly matched. So we see restricted operations, compliance issues, but also 2 times other challenges. So we would like to know what was the challenge behind.
Yeah, the pre-arrival one is a popular one, right? Because typically in the old version, the whole management of the shipshore safety checklist was typically done by the control room operator or the loading master that goes on board. And now in the with the pre-arrival bit added to the version 6, you see on the terminal sites, you see now planning departments or customer service departments need to get involved, because we need to send this stuff before the ship's arriving, and also the vessel has additional pre-arrival work to do. So that's absolutely was one of the challenges, but I think we've handled that quite nicely.
Yeah. Let's continue to the digital part. So what we have tried to show you was the ISGOTT process, and that will also make it a bit more clear what we think is the direct value of digitizing this process. Edwin was referring to one form, and we can also call that a collaborative workspace. So we have one workspace which is available through the cloud, where both the terminal and the ship can collaborate on exchanging pre-arrival information. That's on the one hand adding, let's say, all the pre-arrival checks into the system, that they have agreed on those, and that they how do you say that are being taken care of. But on the other hand, it's also about uploading documents. So for example, how do you make the terminal booklet available easily to download for the vessel? Or maybe you have to upload other documents as well in the process that you want to exchange. So that collaborative workspace is not only pre-arrival, but it's also during arrival and during the repetitive checks stage is really important, because the right parties have access to that space, and they can download the checklist on their behalf, but they can also add the checks whenever necessary. The second thing, and that's more about also already touched a bit, it's process flexibility and efficiency. So for example, what I remember from Singapore is that it was not allowed to go on board for a while, and other ports has also had the same restriction. So then the whole process had to be executed remote, meaning that it was not allowed that people would come together and that the shipshore safety checklist pre-transfer could have done in the same room. So the persons were not at the same place. So in the process, there should be flexibility to say, on the one hand, we have a process that we can fulfill face-to-face from each other, and the other hand, we have a process where we will not see each other, and we have to fulfill it remotely. Third part is about informed stakeholders. So as you can imagine, there's a collaborative workspace, but after each step of the process, documentation shall be created. So, for example, once the pre-arrival checks are being done, the pre-arrival part can be finished. Once the ship shore safety checklist pre-transfer has been done, that checklist can be submitted among parties. And it's not only between the vessel and the terminal, but for example, also the agency can receive this information, or a surveyor to look at it. Compliant workflow. So maybe when you do it paper-based, it's not always possible, right, to say that the checklist was submitted successfully, so that like, all the mandatory checks were being checked and all the remarks had been stated in case different. So with a digital tool, you can enforce that. So you can really make sure that if you have an oil tanker, or if you have a gas tanker or a chemical tanker, that you enforce the users of this tool to make sure that they fulfill the whole process compliant. And what we have seen, and that was also very, very interesting, is involved operators. So there's a lot of maybe untankable knowledge by the operator sometimes that you as an organization are not aware about. And what we have seen is by digitizing a first version together with them and then getting their feedback makes the solution a lot stronger. And this solution has been co-developed by different operators around the world from different ports and different terminals. And for example, one of the key things they came up with is, for example, the all-fast time that happens in some ports. So when the ship shore safety checklist pre-transfer has been submitted, it's not always directly that the transfer will start. So they wanted to use an all-fast time to make sure that the transfer can start only when they indicate, and then the first repetitive check will take place with respect to the interval time right after. So with that kind of operator knowledge inside the tool, it becomes also more flexible to do it in the way operators would like to use it. But maybe Edwin, you can also share a bit about the indirect values that you see also from an expert point of view.
Yeah, absolutely, and maybe more from a terminal point of view, is my key knowledge when it comes to this particular process. Often when people start talking about the value of these kind of digitalization processes or projects, they look at where am I getting the value, and they look at the process itself. But there's a lot of add-ons that you see, not directly but indirectly, and one of them, for example, is a better quality of your data. Now we're, as I said earlier, in our industry, very dependent on people with pen, paper, and rubber stamps, and you see a lot of handwritten checklists, and especially with notes and remarks that are basically unreadable. Now with the use of technology like tablets, it's easier to have drop downs in place where operators can select values automatically, or use voice to text solutions where you're sure that your data is captured correctly. And another benefit is, maybe you can't do that now, but you can do that in the future. Some of the data in, for example, such a ship shore checklist is captured in your own ERP system, vessel data, nomination data, for example, information about the jetty, the products you're about to load. You can imagine that companies that are already ready to integrate those systems, they're able to feed and pre-populate a lot of the information that needs to be filled out in these forms, again, making the process more efficient. And at the back end, you can imagine once the ship shore checklist is filled out and the vessel departs, you want to store your signed checklist in a PDF format automatically in your own ERP system with that particular vessel call. Now, these kind of integrations, which some people already have in place, greatly reduce the time for double data entry or for filing. But also think of analytics, as Jelle was just saying. The moment you commence a checklist and when you're complete, I mean that these are timestamps that are relevant. So you can incorporate that in your analytics. So you know from your all-fast gangway down, when did you start your ship shore conference? When did you end? So it is really clear timestamps that you can then use in your analytics. Obviously, I think we touched on that as well. There is a need to file these documents and to have an audit trail. We have greatly automated that, so storage, secure storage of those files is available, and also the distribution of the signed documents is fully automated via emails. The moment the parties sign the documents, relevant parties get an email with that document. So there's clear benefits in terms of filing and audit trails and compliance there as well.
Yes, thank you, Edwin. And hi, Paresh. Welcome from Adani LPG in Gujarat. How do you say India? Also happy that you have joined.
Gujarat.
Oh yeah.
Welcome.
Yeah. Well, while digitizing, you also have to take into account scenario thinking. And maybe one of the first things is, do I have connectivity at all places where I want to use a digital tool? So, for example, offline working is very much important when it comes to digitizing, because a paper-based checklist, once printed, can also be used offline. So making sure that you don't have connection problems, but that you can work offline has been also a major attention point while developing this solution. The second one, and that was touched already, are operational restrictions. So making the scenario thinking about, okay, what are port authorities expecting from us, but also with respect to different types of loading or unloading. And then we also talk about barges and tankers. So, for example, if you have a barge ship, which parts of the ISGOTT you can use, which parts you don't have to use, or which other documents become relevant. And loading or unloading is also important, and the type of product that you use there. So with all these type of scenarios, it becomes quite of a matrix what process to follow. Yeah, that's why it's important to take into account while digitizing such a process that you also do some scenario thinking, and it's not only one way forward. And it also makes it, if you want to use it standalone or you want to use it integrated with other solutions. So, for example, if you have a TMS solution where you do a nomination of a vessel, you might want to reuse that information and create, let's say, the documentation up front as a terminal. And you don't want that to be a manual task anymore, and also the way back. So Edwin was talking about the timestamp. So when the ship shore safety checklist has been submitted, then yeah, you want to know from your TMS system the date and time when that was done, and the interval time maybe for your repetitive checks. So from that perspective, going digital is not only about digitizing the checklist, but also digitizing the whole scenario that you will find once using such a tool.
Yes, and before Jelle dives into the actual demo of the tool itself, I just wanted to show this slide, because this is obviously the single most popular comment that everyone will have who is faced with a digitization project. There's obviously resistance to these kind of things in our industry. This will never work for us because A, B, C, or D. Now, I just wanted to share that we have seen that front runners both in Europe and in Asia that have been started working with this digital application, they actually really liked it, and really, because of the intuitive UI and the highly customizable forms, it was very easy to make this custom made to the particular terminal or refinery that wanted to use it. And even the most, as I say, the digitally challenged were able to find this of great help. And why is that? Because that's why you start, right? The why, explaining why we need to do this, and there are reasons for safety, compliance. We talked about COVID restrictions earlier, sustainability. I mean, the number of papers and carbon copies that we're spending on this, it's quite spectacular. Maybe it's not going to change the climate by going digital on this particular form, but imagine all the forms that we're doing. And also the efficiency we have demonstrated in a lot of terminals that they shave off at least 15 minutes, 20 minutes per vessel when going digital. And then when you extrapolate that to all your vessels at your jetties over 1 year, that's a very interesting saving when it comes to jetty occupancy. As I said, and hopefully Jelle will demonstrate that as well, what the operators really fell for was a simple interface. It's extremely intuitive, the process. It's very simple, and Smartflow has the capability to customize it, so to add certain checklists or questions that are relevant for your domain, for your area, that really make it easy. And again, people say, well, where we come from, our operators or all the people that are visiting on the vessels, they will never be able to understand this. Yeah, well, if you go to an operator canteen nowadays, they're all playing with one of those, either checking their bank statements, their gaming, or they're talking to their family. So yeah, what we've seen that it is no longer a reason not to use it. We've also seen it in the deployment. It's extremely simple. We were able to do remote train-the-trainer concepts where key users in terminals and refineries were simply trained how to use the application, and shift teams were trained within half an hour prior to their shift. They would get an instruction, and they would be able to use the application on the first vessel that came along. So you really saw it's quickly. You can give local ownership to the folks on the ground, and you're up and running really quickly. So again, scaling, you start small, you start with an ISGOTT checklist, you can add workflows like a load plan that Smartflow is also offering. But you start small, you get people to understand this application, whether they use it with tablets or whether they use it remotely. And as Jelle said, I mean, these guys really love it because they feel empowered and they feel enabled. They love doing away with pen and paper. So again, from experience in key ports in Rotterdam and in Asia, we have seen that people from all walks of life and in all kinds of digital maturity, people have been very rapidly onboarded onto this application. So let that not be a reason to not consider it for your location. Now, Jelle, I think we're quite curious to see more about the application by now.
Yeah. Can you see my screen, Edwin?
Something's popping up. Yeah.
Yeah. Then I will start it. Yeah. So this is actually the ISGOTT solution. So what you see here is that it consists of the different steps, right? There are a new ISGOTT to be created. You can find the ships that are in the pre-arrival stage, that are in the arrival terminal stage, that are in the repetitive check stage, and all the ships that have left the terminal. There are some analytics available. When you look at the process, when you create a new ISGOTT, for example, the ETA date, ETA time of the ship have to be provided. The port, the ship will be available to. I will try to make it a bit more high level. The screen. This is better, I think. Yeah. So the port of Singapore, the terminal to be selected, the tanker, the jetty, and the email address. And this one is really important, where we will communicate with the products that are part of the process. And then the different tasks, they will pop up in the screen. Here you see the different steps of the process. So now the form has been created. All the ships that are in the pre-arrival process are visible here, and the checklist can be submitted. So this is part 2, and as you can see here, there's also some logic built in where you can already by default state the remarks that you want to provide. So for example, there are some remarks relevant for your terminal, then they can be provided automatically in this section, so that the checklist always contains the right agreements. This part of the process can be completed. And when that is done, the option comes to invite the ship. and the ship will be invited by an email. So the ship will get an email into their email address. They will get the audit trail, audit PDF available, and they can click on a link, and with that link they get access to the same process. But they cannot change everything, as you have seen, but they can only change the relevant information. So for example, they can change a bit of the ETA time when they think to arrive. But they can also submit, of course, the various checks that they have to provide prior to arrival. So this is the collaborated workspace that we are talking about. And once that is done, and when the ship is being arrived at the terminal, the process can be followed further. So it was just a quick glimpse of the presentation of the demo, and I will put the slides back on. Yes. But hopefully it gives you some insight that with a tool like Smartflow, you're able to digitize the ISGOTT process. But as you can imagine, there are many other tasks that can also be relevant in such a process. So for example, in the pre-arrival stage, you might want to also have a different additional checklist that can be called the pre-berthing questionnaire. So that questionnaire consists of other checks that you also want to exchange with the vessel prior to arrival. And pre-transfer, as Edwin was talking about, for example, load discharge plan. So from Smartflow end and from NxtPort end, in our collaboration with the various terminals, we are adding more and more templates into the system that are, for you, maybe 80% usable, and with those 20% changes, so that specific localized checks that you might have to do in your terminal operations. The system can be expanded to make it fully customized to your terminal. And as Edwin was saying, it should be very easy to do so. So you're just creating a checklist, and for an operator, they will have to see, hey, there's another task for me. I need to fulfill this task, or for the ship, and to submit the information. Maybe you also have something to add to that, Edwin?
Yes, maybe to add, indeed, you just give a quick insights on the first steps of filling out the ISGOTT checklist. The whole process would take a bit too long to do this in this particular webinar. So we invite people to sign up to get a free trial of the digital ISGOTT, and then you'll be demonstrated the full flow, including the arrival activities and the repetitive checks. As we said earlier, that's a fully digitized process and automated process where you can add relevant checklists to your particular environment. What you've seen, right? So the ISGOTT questionnaires, this is a one-to-one copy of the actual ISGOTT guidelines. So it was decided not to change that, but any other local checklist, whether it's hydrogen operation, oil pollution checklists, or walkie-talkie checklists, or you name them, you can just pick from a list of available checklists, or have one created very quickly for you. Yeah, that's what I wanted to add on the application itself. I can only repeat what I said earlier. It's extremely intuitive, and the operators are trained for using. Not only the operators, also on the vessel side. You have seen, whether it was in Rotterdam, it was in Singapore, in Houston, ships calling those ports coming from all over the world, and we saw a very quick adoption of these checklists wherever we went. So
yeah, maybe as a quick summary, so that the main points are clear. A co-developed ISGOTT solution, the ability to add additional ship-shore checklists, standard views, and that's important to see which vessels are in which stages. So when an operator comes to the jetty, for example, for a shift handover, they can see actually the ships that are in the repetitive check stage and when the next repetitive check should take place, but also the ships that are waiting to fully submit the ship shore safety checklist. Standard email notifications to all relevant stakeholders with print versions attached. So every time the output is sent along. Also the option, whenever the authority asks you to do so, to download checklist immediately and provide them the information if they desire. And the last part, and that's also, I think, an important decision that we made, is that we want to create the collaborative workspace by not asking the vessel or the ship's captain to register in some kind of tool, but just to easily click on a link, being part of the collaborated solution, submit a checklist, find the relevant information like the terminal booklet, but no hassle around. So really communication that if you come, you can just quickly start executing instead of having to register yourself or to remember your password or anything like that. So that's a quick summary, and of course we are also happy to answer your questions if you may have any. What are the things that are popping up your mind? The questions that you have based on this this webinar. Please let us know by chat. Maybe that's a good question for you, Edwin. The question from Marcus.
What kind of hardware are you recommending for operators? Well, as I said, it depends very much on your location. You see more and more terminals are equipping their operators with tablets. This can be ATEX approved tablets or regular tablets which are in ATEX casing. We have been seeing those used extensively in the world, but if you're not able to make such investments, you can also use the remote version, because then you only use your desktops, obviously. But typically, what we see, especially with the larger terminal operators, not only for the ship-shore interactions, but also for the operational check rounds. That's another thing that Smartflow is offering. A lot of the terminals are moving to tabletize their workforce, because every data point that you digitally capture is securely brought in. There's a few parties that offer this ATEX certified tablets, but as I said, there's a few operators, tank terminal operators, that are using iPads, and they use specific sleeves to make them EX proof.
All right, I see a second question coming from Stefanos. Yeah, pricing. What we have developed together with NxtPort is a pay-per-use model. So it will cost around I think $10 to start with first vessel arrival, and then there's like a staffel. If you use more vessels, so you have a high volume, then the price will be a lot lower. So it's actually pay-per-use. So there's only being paid for the system if you're actually using it, and when vessels are coming to your terminal. I hope that answered your question, Stefanos.
And click that link and sign up for that free trial. You'll find out more, I guess.
Yeah. Then you can see how it actually works. Any other questions?
But that's actually the interesting thing in our partnership, where normally you would be paying a monthly or annual subscriptions. By using NxtPort, we're able to offer these pay-per-use models where NxtPort is tracking the usage and can do the billing for those application builders. So you have a choice there, and the aim is very much to make sure that users with lower volumes are enticed to use these kind of applications, because you're not tied to these expensive annual fees, but you can tie that to the actual usage. So yeah, do get in touch with Smartflow and find out more. again, I'm not sure if people are able to unmute and ask the questions themselves, or they have to come through the chat. But we're here to add to answer any more of your questions. Maybe one point I would like to add. We didn't talk about that, Jelle, but we received a lot of support and endorsement from the port authorities where we typically launch this. So in the larger ports, when we started the trials in Rotterdam, Houston, and Singapore, we always engage the port authorities to get their thoughts on moving digital and ask for their endorsement. In some ports, that's really required to get their endorsements. In other places, they just really encourage people to use it. So it's also something that is heavily supported by the local authorities where we have been rolling this out. And again, ISGOTT are obviously providing guidelines. It's the local port authorities that are leading in that respect. So that is something to bear in mind when start using this.
Yeah, it's a very important point, because sometimes you need approval to to run off. But luckily, there are some front runners already having done that.
It's out there in the market. People are using it. The operators are enthusiastic, and operators are coming from all walks of life. So I would be really enthusiastic to see in places like the Maldives or Angola or Indonesia to see more and more use of digital checklists that you can very rapidly deploy.
I think there's also a very important question from Jorge, Edwin. You also have a lot of experience with that particular subject.
Yeah, that's a good point, and I think there may be some chief officers or masters joining the call that they would have seen that as well. I think thanks to COVID, perhaps we can say that the cost of satellite connections on board are now much lower than they used to be. So indeed, in the past, that would be a reason to say we don't want to use the expensive satellite connection to fill out a lot of paperwork. What we have seen throughout the deployments we had, that is really no longer an issue, because those costs are no longer a blocker. And again, the checklist that the vessel is filling out during pre-arrival and arrival stage, they're intuitive, so they're not spending a lot of time using their connection either. So yeah, we've spoken with a number of ship management companies and owners, and yeah, that's the feedback we received, and we see the tooling in action without that particular feedback as well. And maybe, Jelle, you talked about the online offline functionality. I think this is one of the great improvements over earlier versions of this product by other providers, is that we all know that on board it's going to be difficult to get that connectivity. So when the operator is on board with his or her tablet, you will work offline. They can fill out the checklist, and the moment the operator is back on shore and gets connectivity, automatically the checklists are being synced. So also that now is no longer a technical issue that we've experienced sometimes in the past.
What is your point of view going forward, Edwin, for the connectivity of vessels? Because now it's mostly a satellite, but do you think 5G will have a big difference for that?
Well, that's not something I know a lot about to comment. It's a popular discussion. Should you offer Wi-Fi from the shore side to the vessels? There's, I think, that discussion is mainly led by cybersecurity concerns. So no, let me not comment here, because I'm not a maritime expert, let alone someone who knows something about connectivity. But it's something if you look at the drive to digitize, not only on shore, but also on those vessels, there's a lot of drives by owners to get more data out of their ships into core systems, so that there need to be an improved connectivity. And there's a lot of technology that's being tested, whether that's 5G or other solutions. I'm sure some people in the audience would know more about that. But
yeah, but at least there's drive, you say, so that is good, because that change begins there.
absolutely,
Yeah.
and we all know that we're no longer saying data is the new oil, because we say that doesn't sound so sustainable. We say data is the new sunshine, because that's for free and it's in abundance. But to get that, you need connectivity. So there will definitely be a drive to further improve connectivity.
Yeah, Marcus is asking a question that you also addressed a bit before, Edwin, about having two separate forms for submitting the same checklist.
Yeah. Well, like probably many of you in the audience, we spend a few years in this industry. We all want to have a rubber stamp. I think why also Smartflow started working on operational checklists. It's a bit easier to start removing the rubber stamp from and the paper checklist from the process if it's more on the operational side, rather than when you're talking about commercially sensitive documents. This year experience, we have seen not only using digital formats, but if you just say we're only going to fill out one form, we're going to only fill out one form. I was a shift leader before at the Europort terminal in Rotterdam for Vopak, and there we would only fill out one ship shore safety checklist, the one of the terminal, and we never ever filled out two checklists, and that was way before digitization. So it's also a matter of enforcing things and pushing forward. And what we've seen, that it is absolutely great. When we started getting on those vessels with those tablets, we were expecting a lot of resistance. You can imagine some Eastern European chief officer or whoever needed to use a tablet, and they all loved it. There was really not an issue. I think everybody in this world is now moving forward. We all have these kind of things, and it's just surprising that when we go to work, if you work in the maritime or port industry, it seems like you're going into a time machine back into time 30 years. But that is really, if we're able to make this work in key ports around the world without issue, this is a matter of just pushing through. But popular discussion.
There are the good questions that we have been facing, of course, in earlier stages. And also nice that he agrees with you. Thank you, Marcus. I think maybe we have to bring it to an end. If there is not a last question, we can finalize this webinar. Of course, we want to thank you dearly for joining. Also, thank you for asking those really good questions, because that's actually the questions also that we were thinking of by digitizing this process. So it's good that these questions still are very much alive in the market. If you're interested to try it out or to get in touch, please hit the free trial button in the presentation slides that have been handed out by Stefana, our moderator of today. Also, thank you, Stefana, for doing all the effort there. And we'll also send you the presentation and the slides afterwards. Any last words from you, Edwin?
I would like to thank everyone for their time and for their contributions through the questions. Again, if you want to know more about the application, get in touch with Jelle or sign up through the materials that are being sent. If you want to know more about NxtPort, find us on LinkedIn and find me on LinkedIn, and happy to share more. In the meanwhile, stay safe and thank you from dialing in from all your respective locations. Great to see, or at least read all of you in the chat.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much. Bye bye.